Picture this. You've just landed a new client, Singapore Private Limited. The director found you through a referral. He's agreed to a first meeting next Monday. And you're sitting at your desk the night before thinking, what exactly am I supposed to ask?
I've been in that exact situation. And honestly, the first time it happened to me, I walked in with a list of about 20 questions, and I barely got through 3 of them.
Right, because a first client meeting isn't about asking everything. It's about asking the right things, in the right order, in a way that makes the client feel heard, not interrogated.
So today we're talking about exactly that, the questions you ask in a first client meeting. And equally important, what you're actually writing down while the client is talking.
And I want to mention one thing before we get into it. There's one specific question that experienced accountants almost always ask in a first client meeting that most junior accountants almost never think of. We'll get to exactly what it is, but first, let's set the scene.
So Jack, paint the picture. What does a typical first meeting look like in a Singapore accounting services context?
Most of the time, it's a video call, 30 to 45 minutes. The client is usually a director of a small private limited, a trading company, a consultancy, maybe a family-owned business. They've either outgrown their current accountant or they're just starting up. And you're there to figure out 2 things. What do they actually need? And can you actually help them?
And that second part, can you actually help them? I think that's something a lot of junior accountants forget. We walk in trying to sell ourselves, when really we should be listening.
A first client meeting is not a sales pitch. It's not an interview. It's not even really about accounting. It's about understanding how this person thinks about their business and whether you're the right person to help them.
So where do you start?
The simplest question in the world. Could you tell me a little about your business? And then you stop talking and you listen.
That's it?
That's it. Because as they're talking, you're doing 2 things at once. You're listening for the business model. What do they do? How do they make money? And you're listening for the accounting picture behind it. Service business? I'm thinking invoices, accounts receivable, maybe retainers. Trading business? I'm thinking inventory, purchase orders, maybe import documentation.
I use a phrase for this. I say, could you run me through how a typical transaction works for your business? And that one question tells me so much.
That's a great phrase, because run me through signals that you want the whole picture, step by step, not just the headline. Okay, so here's where it gets really practical. After the business overview, you move into what I call the accounting setup questions. 3 things you need to know. What software are they on? Who's been handling the books? And what's the current state of those books?
The software question is important not just for technical reasons. It tells you how sophisticated the client is. If they're on Xero with bank feeds connected, that's a very different situation from someone who's been emailing you PDFs of their bank statements.
Good point. And the who's been handling the books question, this one can be sensitive. Sometimes the previous accountant was the client's cousin. Sometimes they left the country. You need that information, but you have to ask it carefully.
How do you phrase it?
I'd say, could you tell me a little about your current accounting setup questions? Who's been supporting you on the account side so far?
Supporting you on the account side. That's much more diplomatic than who did your accounting before.
The word supporting is doing a lot of work there. It doesn't imply the previous person did anything wrong. It just opens the door.
And once you understand the setup, software, team, current state, then you move into scope.
Right. And this is where you need to be very specific. Because I need someone to do my accounts can mean 100 different things.
I've learned this the hard way. A client once thought my monthly bookkeeping fee included preparing financial statements for his bank loan. It did not. That conversation was not fun.
And that's the risk. If you're not clear about scope early, you end up in a conversation later that nobody wants to have. Let me give you a real example of this. Here's how a first meeting actually sounds when you put all of this together. Workplace scenario: the first call with a new Singapore client. Setting: video call. Jenny is an accountant speaking with David, sole director of a Singapore trading PTE Ltd. The company imports kitchenware from Vietnam and sells to retailers in Singapore and Malaysia. This is their first meeting.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, David. Thanks for making the time. I thought we'd use this call to get to know your business a little better and understand what kind of support you're looking for. Does that work for you?
Yes, sure. I just need someone to handle the accounts. My previous accountant moved back to Malaysia, so I'm looking for someone new.
Got it. Could you run me through a bit about the business first? What does a typical month look like on the sales and purchasing side?
Sure. We import from 2 suppliers in Vietnam. We place orders about twice a month. We sell to around 20 retailers across Singapore and Malaysia. We invoice in SGD for Singapore customers, USD for Malaysia.
Okay, so multi-currency transactions on both sides. Are you currently using any accounting software?
We've been on Xero, yes. My previous accountant set it up, but honestly, I'm not sure how it's been maintained. I haven't looked at the reports in about 6 months.
That's really helpful to know. I'd flag that as something we'd want to look at early on, just to make sure the books are up to date before we take over formally.
Yes, that would be good.
And in terms of what you need, is it mainly monthly bookkeeping or are there other things on your list? GST returns, payroll?
Monthly bookkeeping, yes. GST returns. We're a quarterly filer, and I have 2 employees, so payroll as well.
Perfect. And just one more question. Who currently reviews and approves the financial reports before they're filed? Is it yourself, or is there a CFO or financial controller involved?
Just me. I'm the sole director.
Good to know. That helps me understand the communication flow. I'll make sure everything we send you is clear enough to review without needing an accountant in the room.
So,
Can I ask about that last question? The one about who reviews and approves?
that's the one I mentioned at the start.
Right. I was wondering when that was coming.
It looks like a simple admin question, but it's doing multiple things at once. It tells you the sign-off chain. Is there a board involved, an investor, or is it genuinely just one person? And it signals to the client that you take proper process seriously.
And if the answer is, actually, my investor reviews everything before we file, that changes the whole picture. Timeline, communication, level of detail in the reports.
Exactly. And you'd never know that if you didn't ask.
Let's talk about note-taking for a moment, because what you capture during the meeting shapes everything that comes after. The proposal, the engagement letter, the setup.
But wait, there's something most people don't talk about, which is the quality of those notes. Not just what you write, but how you write it. Because sometimes those notes get handed to a junior on your team, or reviewed 6 months later when the client calls with a question.
So I try to write notes that are specific enough to be useful to someone who wasn't on the call. Not accounts are a bit messy, but 6 months of unreconciled transactions, multi-currency, may require catch-up work. That's a different level of information.
Completely different. And it also protects you. If there's ever a question about what was discussed in the first meeting, your notes are the record.
My standard checklist: business nature, current software, year-end date, GST registration and filing frequency, payroll headcount, and then a section I call special situations. Anything unusual the client mentioned that might affect scope or pricing.
I love that. Special situations is doing exactly the right job. And this connects to something bigger, which is that the bar for how we onboard new clients has gone up a lot in recent years.
And for Vietnamese accountants providing remote services to Singapore clients, having a structured onboarding process is actually a real advantage because it signals professionalism from day one. A shared Google Drive folder, a clear timeline, a one-page summary of what you discussed. That's what clients remember.
The first client meeting is where that relationship starts, and the impression you make in those 45 minutes follows you through the whole engagement.
Okay, time for 3 takeaways.
Thanks for listening to The Balance Sheet Guy. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jenny. See you next time.
Could you run me through a bit about the business? Open, professional, invites the client to talk, not a yes-no question. I'd flag that as something we'd want to look at early on. Signals a potential issue without alarming the client or criticizing the previous accountant. Just to make sure the books are up to date before we take over. Frames your concern as a precaution, not an accusation.